So in our discussions regarding common human diseases, we will start with bacterial diseases caused by different kinds of bacteria, right? And then in this case, we have got two bacterial diseases which we have to discuss in detail, and then rest you have to do a research of your own, right? So the two bacterial diseases given in your textbook are typhoid fever and pneumonia. So we will start with typhoid fever. And whenever you study about a particular disease, right, what you have to know, what are the information that are required for that particular disease is you have to know about pathogen, right? What is the organism responsible for causing that particular disease? And then you have to know about the mode of infection, how that particular pathogen spreads from human to human. So that is mode of infection. And then you have to know about the symptoms of that particular disease. Right. It is quite significant. You need to know the symptoms of particular disease, because in question papers what I have seen is they have asked questions based upon you are suffering from such and such symptoms, and what is the pathogen responsible for it, or what is the name of the disease. So such questions may come, right? So you need to know the symptoms, specific symptoms regarding specific diseases. And then we have to know about the control measures of that particular disease, and some miscellaneous informations may be given regarding particular diseases in your textbook. So we will start discussion about our typhoid fever, right? So typhoid fever, it is caused by Salmonella typhi. So Salmonella typhi is a gram-negative bacteria. It's a rod-shaped bacteria. It's a motile bacteria. Okay, so it has got lots of flagella over here. So Salmonella typhi, it's the pathogen responsible for causing typhoid fever, or simply typhoid. So how does the Salmonella typhi bacteria spread from human to human, right? So the mode of infection of that particular pathogen is the pathogen enters the small intestine through contaminated food and water, right? So the pathogen, it enters through contaminated food and water through our mouth. It somehow survives the low pH or the acidic environment of your stomach, and then it goes into the intestine where it causes infection, right? So that is the mode of infection of Salmonella typhi. So what are the signs and symptoms of typhoid, right? So the symptoms are, so this is the list of symptoms given over here: sustained high fever of about 39 to 40 degrees centigrade. Okay, weakness of your body, you will feel stomach pain, constipation, headache, and loss of appetite. So these are some common symptoms of typhoid fever. In severe cases, so I have written this in red, in severe cases what happens is the typhoid fever, the Salmonella typhi may cause intestinal perforation. It will cause holes within your intestinal walls, which may lead to death. Right? So in severe cases what happens, intestinal perforation and death may occur. So this, you can imagine, if there are holes on your intestinal wall, right, it can create large cavities which can lead to your stomach content or your gut content to go into the abdominal cavity. So this will lead to the spread of Salmonella typhi to other body organs through blood, right? So that can prove quite lethal. So these are the symptoms regarding typhoid fever. So control measures, what are the control measures of this particular disease? If you know the pathogen, if you know the mode of infection of that particular pathogen, then you will figure out the proper control measures, right? So the control measures regarding typhoid fever, or how to control the pathogen Salmonella typhi, is you have to follow proper hygiene and proper sanitation, right? You have to avoid eating raw fruits and vegetables, right? Since it can enter through contaminated food and water, you have to follow proper hygiene and sanitation, and you have to avoid eating raw fruits and vegetables available in the market, especially those fruits which cannot be peeled, right? So that is the two preventive measures. And if you get typhoid fever, and if you get all these symptoms, and you should go to the doctor, he will do the diagnostic test, and then if the typhoid fever is confirmed, the doctor will prescribe antibiotics as a treatment. Okay, so that is the control measure of the typhoid fever, or Salmonella typhi. And one more miscellaneous information is given regarding typhoid fever. So the typhoid fever can be confirmed by a particular diagnostic test known as Vidal test. So Vidal test is, I think, antigen antibiotic based test, right? A specific reaction between antigen antibody, also not antibiotics, it is an antigen antibody reaction based test. Okay, so that is about the typhoid fever. And I will give you one more information over here. The pathogen responsible for typhoid fever, Salmonella typhi, it spreads through fecal oral route. So what it means is, if there is no toilet, if there is no closed toilet, if a person goes out and does his business outside, what may happen is, if that person is infected with Salmonella typhi, and if he goes to a toilet outside, right, in open, what may happen is the fecal matter will contain that particular pathogen, and the pathogen may spread into the nearby water bodies, right, like ponds, rivers, or even underground water, and this can lead to the contamination of water. So the water becomes unsafe to drink. And if there is no proper water treatment, what may happen is it can lead to the spread of that particular pathogen to other people who may drink that particular water. Right? And therefore, keeping this in mind, in India, the government of India is trying to spread awareness to the general public regarding the importance of using closed toilets. Right? So celebrities like Amitabh Bachchan, he appears on TV saying that do not go out in the open to do your business when nature calls. Right? Don't run into nature when nature calls to do your business. So that is the importance of awareness regarding the particular disease that we were talking about before, right, in my previous video. Right? If you want to protect yourself, if you want to protect the society from the diseases like typhoid, you should build more public toilets. You should build toilet within your home and use that toilet rather than going out into the open to do the business. Okay, so that is the thing. And regarding typhoid, there is a curious case of Typhoid Mary. It is given in your textbook, Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary, or that Typhoid Mary is not her real name. It was a nickname given to her. So her real name is Mary Malone. Right? Why was she called a Typhoid Mary? Mary Malone was a cook by profession. Right? So she was a typhoid carrier. Remember this particular word, carrier. Right? She was a typhoid carrier, and she was responsible for spreading typhoid to many people in New York City in early 1900s. Right? So she was a cook, so she prepared food, and unknowingly, right, unintentionally, right, she was unaware about herself being the carrier of that particular pathogen. So when she cooked and she fed to the people who ate food cooked by her suffered from typhoid. Right? So she was responsible for spreading typhoid to many people in New York City in early 1900s. That's why she was called Typhoid Mary. Now coming to the word typhoid carrier, what it means is she was an asymptomatic carrier. Even though she had Salmonella typhi within her body, right, she did not develop typhoid fever. She did not develop the disease. So that's the weird thing about the biology of these infectious diseases. There are certain people within our population who acts as carriers of the pathogens. Right? They do not show the symptoms and signs and symptoms of the disease, or they do not show the symptoms of presence of that particular pathogen within the body. They simply act as carriers. Right? So that thing is also there. So we never know. Right? We may have, in this particular case, in this time of coronavirus pandemic, we may have individuals who are simply carriers, the ones which we call as asymptomatic patients. Right? So some people may be simply carriers of the disease, and which lead to the spread of that particular disease within the population. All right, so that is about the typhoid. So the second bacterial disease that we need to discuss in detail is pneumonia. So right from the start, I want you to know that pneumonia is an infection that inflames the alveoli of our lungs. Right? So the pathogen, it infects the alveoli of our lungs, and that leads to filling of fluid or pus within our alveoli. Right? That can lead to breathing difficulties. So over here in this particular picture, you can see that our lungs have got small air sacs called as alveoli. Right? In normal case, normal air sacs, they do not contain fluids and pus. But if you get pneumonia, what happens? There is infection of your alveoli, and the alveoli gets filled with fluid or pus, right? That causes breathing difficulties. So that is what is pneumonia. And now don't think that pneumonia is caused only by bacteria, right? There are other organisms, there are viruses which also can cause pneumonia. Okay, so in our case we have to discuss pneumonia caused by bacteria, right? So the pathogens responsible for pneumonia are, there are two bacteria over here, Streptococcus pneumonia and Haemophilus influenzae, right? So these two bacteria are responsible for causing pneumonia. So these two bacteria, okay. And if you look at Streptococcus pneumoniae, Streptococcus means circular bacteria which occurs in chains, right? Coccus means circular bacteria, and Streptococcus means circular bacteria which occurs in chains. And Streptococcus pneumonia is a gram-positive bacteria. Okay, it shows positive staining by the gram stain. Okay, so that is why it is called as gram-positive bacteria. And if you talk about mode of infection, how does these bacteria spread from person to person? It spreads, the pathogen infects the alveoli of the lungs via inhalation of droplets released by an infected person, right? So the pathogen, or the Streptococcus pneumonia and Haemophilus influenza, it infects the alveoli of our lungs when we inhale the droplets released by an infected person. If there is an infected person nearby, right, if he coughs or sneezes, he releases the droplets, and the droplets contains the pathogen, right? And if we inhale that particular air, what happens? The pathogen enters our body, right? And that's how the pathogen spreads from person to person. And not only that, it's not just airborne, it can also spread by sharing of solid objects, like sharing of glasses and utensils with infected person, right? So these are the modes of infection of bacteria responsible for causing pneumonia. And now symptoms of pneumonia include fever, chills, cough, and headache. So these are common symptoms. But in severe cases, if you're suffering from severe pneumonia, what happens is your lips and fingernails, they will turn gray to bluish in color. What does it show? Right? It shows that since your lips and your fingernails are turning bluish, it shows that you are not getting proper oxygen within your body. Since your alveoli is getting filled with pus and fluid, it interferes with the proper functioning of your alveoli, which is exchange of gases, and that will lead to insufficient supply of oxygen within your body, and that causes the color change of your lips and your fingernails, right? So that happens in very severe cases. Now, what are the control measures, right? So control measures include proper hygiene. Again, so proper hygiene is really important over here. And avoid coming in contact with infected person. Just like tuberculosis, I hope you know about tuberculosis, right? So you have to avoid coming in contact with infected person, and avoid public places, public gatherings, just like the way we are doing right now, in order to prevent ourselves from getting infected with coronavirus. We are avoiding public gatherings, right? So government is putting bans upon public gatherings. So that is the reason why. So if you don't want to get pneumonia, you have to avoid coming in contact with infected person and avoid large group of people gatherings, right? And then if you get infected by pneumonia, you have to go to the doctor. He or she will confirm whether you have pneumonia caused by bacteria or not. If the bacterial pneumonia is confirmed, then he or she will prescribe antibiotics. Okay, so that is the control measures of pneumonia. Okay, so these are the two bacterial diseases, typhoid and pneumonia. Now what I want you to do is you need to do some research regarding some other bacterial diseases mentioned in your textbook. Dysentery, plague, and diphtheria. So please do research about these things. You know what information you need to search, right? You need to search the name of the pathogen responsible for those diseases, their mode of infection, symptoms of those diseases, and some control measures, right? So that is quite important. You need to do that. Dysentery, it can be caused, and the name of the pathogens I've already given over here. Dysentery is caused by these two bacteria, Shigella and E. coli. So dysentery is caused by these two bacteria, and there may be many more bacteria which can cause dysentery as well. And then we have plague, right? Bubonic plague, you might have heard about that. So plague is caused by a very peculiar named bacteria called Yersinia pestis, right? And the Yersinia pestis, it can spread from person to person through flea. So it spreads from person to person through flea. So flea is the vector of Yersinia pestis. But don't think that flea is the source of is the cause of plague. It's not. It just carries the Yersinia pestis. So Yersinia pestis is responsible for plague. And then we have diphtheria, which is caused by Corynebacterium diphtheriae. All right. So I want you to do research regarding these other bacterial diseases and keep the information with you. Right. We never know. In examination, the examiner might ask these questions about bacterial diseases like dysentery, plague, and diphtheria as well, apart from typhoid and pneumonia. All right. All right, now we will discuss about common human diseases caused by viruses. Right? And in this particular case, we have common cold as an example of common human disease caused by virus. Right? We also have another example of viral disease, that is AIDS, which is caused by HIV. Right? But about AIDS, we will discuss in another video after we have completed the immunology part. Okay, so in this video, we will discuss only about common cold. So common cold is caused by a group of viruses known as rhinoviruses. There are many different strains of viruses which can cause common cold, but the most common pathogen is rhinoviruses. So rhinoviruses, they are retroviruses, which means they have got RNA as their genetic material. And one peculiar thing which I read about rhinoviruses is that it can grow properly at about 32 degrees Celsius, which is much lower compared to our body temperature, which is about 37 degrees Celsius, right? So rhinoviruses, they grow well at around 32 degrees Celsius. So maybe the name of the disease, common cold, might have got something to do with rhinoviruses, the pathogen responsible for common cold, growing at about 32 degrees Celsius, which is much lower than our body temperature, right? So you can find about that one. So rhinoviruses are responsible for common cold, and the mode of infection, these viruses infect the nose and respiratory passages, but not the lungs. Remember, rhinoviruses, they infect the nose and the respiratory passage, not the lungs, through inhalation of droplets released with sneeze or cough by an infected person. Or it can be also spread by contaminated physical objects, right? So the contaminated physical objects are also called as fomites. This particular word has become quite popular due to coronavirus, right? So fomites are the contaminated physical objects. If a person is suffering from a common cold or due to coronavirus, if that person touches a stuff or a physical object, that object becomes a fomite. It's now contaminated. You should not touch that. Okay, so that is about fomites. And now if you look over here, the virus infects only the nose and the respiratory passage. That has also got something to do with rhinoviruses growing well in about 32 degrees Celsius, right? Because of our constant breathing in and out, what happens is the nasal passage and the respiratory passage, which is above the lungs, they remain relatively cooler compared to our inner body temperature, which is 37 degrees Celsius, right? So since the nose and the respiratory tracts, they remain cooler, rhinoviruses, they can thrive in this environment. So that's why rhinoviruses, they infect our nose and respiratory passage, but not the lungs. Okay, that is the thing. Now the symptoms of common cold include nasal congestion and discharge, okay, sore throat, cough, headache, and tiredness. Right. So these are the common symptoms of common cold. And these symptoms, they last for about 3 to 7 days, and the disease usually fades away. And what about the control measures? So the control measures are usually preventive measures such as proper hand washing and use of face masks, just like for coronavirus, and avoiding overcrowded places. So during the season when there is a common cold outbreak, you should avoid going to overcrowded places. Making of vaccination is really difficult. Maybe it has got something to do with rhinoviruses mutating really fast, or scientists, they are not able to produce vaccination because of that. Okay, so that is about the common cold. Now I have also found some other names of diseases which are caused by viruses. These are dengue fever, right? I'm saying this dengue because I think that's the right pronunciation, dengue, not dengue. We usually say dengue, right? But the correct pronunciation is dengue fever, right? So dengue fever and chikungunya, these are two other viral diseases which are quite common, right? And you have to now read about dengue fever and chikungunya and do a research, right? What are the signs and symptoms of these diseases, the causes of these diseases? They are viruses, of course, and how do they spread? If I tell you from now itself, they are spread by mosquitoes, and they are spread by different species of mosquitoes, right? The virus is responsible for these two diseases. They are carried by these mosquitoes. For example, dengue fever is spread by Aedes aegypti. So the virus responsible for dengue fever is spread from person to person by Aedes aegypti. For example, chikungunya, it is spread by Aedes albopictus as well as Aedes aegypti. Right? Because now we will be studying about malaria in our later video. Malaria is also spread by mosquitoes, but that mosquito will be different. You might remember Anopheles mosquitoes, right? So there are different species of mosquitoes responsible for carrying of pathogens. Okay, so that is about some common viral diseases. HIV/AIDS we will study in some other video. Okay. So in our next video, we will be discussing about common human diseases caused by protozoans. So some of the pathogens which causes diseases within human beings, they belong to group protozoa. Okay, so diseases such as malaria, amoebiasis, they are caused by pathogens which belong to protozoa. Okay, please read about these two diseases and then you can watch the next video. Thank you.